Please help me to reach 7,000 subscribers. The golden glow of the restaurant lights shimmered over the polished glasses, soft laughter echoing through the air. It was their 20th wedding anniversary, a night meant for love, memories, and celebration. Family and close friends had gathered around the long mahogany table, the air filled with warmth, nostalgia, and the smell of roasted garlic and champagne. She sat beside him, her hand gently resting on his, a gesture that once meant everything. Her eyes carried that familiar softness, the kind that only years of devotion could create. He smiled back, but it wasn't the same smile she remembered. There was something rehearsed about it, something too controlled. The waiter poured champagne, and as the glasses clinked, he stood up, clearing his throat. "I have something to say," he began, his voice slightly trembling. The room quieted, all eyes turning to him, expecting a romantic speech. She looked up, her heart fluttering. Maybe he'd planned something special. A vow renewal, perhaps? Or a surprise trip they'd always dreamed about. But then his tone shifted. He didn't look at her. He looked through her. "I think it's time we stop pretending," he said. "We both deserve to be happy." Laughter faded. Forks froze midair. Her heart dropped before she even understood why. "What are you saying?" her sister whispered under her breath. He took a deep breath and continued. "I've met someone. I didn't plan it, but it happened. And I can't keep living a lie." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the air out of the room. The wife didn't speak. Not even a tear fell. Her lips parted slightly as if to say something, but she didn't. She just stared at him, her face unreadable, her eyes glassy but dry. Then, slowly, she smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind of smile that made people shift in their seats. A smile that said, "You think you've won, but you have no idea what's coming." The guests began whispering, the awkward tension thick as fog. The husband avoided her gaze. The other woman wasn't there, of course. She was waiting in the shadows, probably watching the clock, imagining freedom beginning tonight. The wife raised her glass. "To the truth," she said softly. Her voice didn't shake. "And to new beginnings." Everyone hesitated, unsure what to do, until she tilted her head slightly, eyes fixed on him. "To freedom," she added, this time with a calm that made him visibly uneasy. The glasses clinked hesitantly. She sipped her drink, then gently set the glass down. For the rest of the evening, she didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't make a scene. She laughed at small jokes, smiled politely, and left early, leaving behind a room full of confusion and whispers. As she walked out into the cool night air, the city lights danced on her face. Inside, her heart was shattering piece by piece, but beneath that pain, something else was forming. Not anger. Not revenge. Something far more powerful. Resolve. Because if he thought that humiliating her in public would break her, he hadn't met the real woman behind that smile. What would you have done if this happened to you? Tell me in the comments, and I'm curious how many of you would have stayed silent, or walked away right there. The morning sun crept through the sheer curtains, washing the room in a dull gold. The bed beside her was empty, not just today, but in every way that mattered. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, her fingers tracing the faint lines on her palm as if searching for the answer to a question she never asked out loud. When did I stop being enough? Her name was Elena Ward, 44 years old, mother of one, wife for 20 years, and for most of that time, the invisible glue that held everything together. While he built his career, she built their life. Every school lunch, every late-night fever, every family gathering, she was the quiet force in the background. Her world revolved around love, loyalty, and the belief that good people didn't deserve bad endings. Until last night. Last night rewrote everything she thought she knew about herself. Downstairs, the smell of coffee filled the kitchen. Her hands moved on instinct, pouring, stirring, setting a mug in its usual spot. His spot. And then she stopped. Her eyes lingered on the chair where he'd sat every morning, scrolling through his phone while she cooked. The same phone he now used to text another woman. She didn't break the mug. She didn't cry into the coffee. She simply placed it in the sink quietly. Because she realized something. She wasn't going to react like a victim. Not this time. That smile she wore last night? It wasn't fake. It was her armor, the calm before the storm. Later that day, she opened her laptop and something she hadn't done in months. She scrolled through emails, old photos, memories frozen in pixels. Every picture of them together looked staged now, every smile tainted with a lie she hadn't seen coming. But then she found something buried deep in an old folder, her own portfolio. Designs she'd created years ago when she dreamed of starting her own interior business. Projects she'd paused when motherhood and marriage took center stage. Her fingers hovered over those images. She remembered that version of herself. Confident, creative, ambitious. The woman who had goals beyond grocery lists and laundry loads. That woman wasn't gone. She'd just been quiet. That night she stood in front of the mirror studying her reflection. The fine lines, the tired eyes, the faint sadness that lingered, but beneath it all a spark. One that no betrayal could extinguish. "You don't get to destroy me," she whispered to her own reflection. "You just reminded me who I was before you." She didn't tell her daughter. Not yet. She didn't call her friends or her sister. Instead, she spent that weekend organizing her thoughts, writing down every expense, every account, every detail she'd once ignored. Because Elena wasn't just healing, she was preparing. Some battles aren't fought with anger. They're fought with silence, patience, and precision. And while he believed she was too broken to fight back, she was already 3 steps ahead, planning her return, her redemption, and his downfall. Tell me in the comments, do you think silence is weakness or the deadliest form of strength? The days that followed looked ordinary from the outside. But inside that quiet house, nothing was the same. Elena moved through her routines like a ghost, polite smiles and gentle nods masking the storm that brewed beneath. Every word he spoke, every late return home, every nervous glance at his phone, she saw it all. She didn't confront him. Not yet, because Elena had learned something powerful. People reveal more when they think you're not watching. One afternoon, while folding laundry in their bedroom, she heard the faint buzz of his phone on the dresser. The screen lit up for just a second, enough for her to catch the name, Mara. Her breath caught. There it was, the woman who had rewritten her husband's heart. Elena picked up the phone, thumb hovering just above the screen. She didn't unlock it. She didn't need to. That tiny red heart told her everything she'd been pretending not to know. Later that night, she sat by the window, the house dark and still. The moonlight spilled across the table where she'd laid out her tools. Not weapons, but armor, her laptop, a notebook, a USB drive. She started digging. She found emails, hidden folders, money transfers that didn't make sense. He wasn't just cheating. He was shifting assets, quietly draining their joint account into a private one. Setting up his new beginning, $1 at a time. A chill ran through her, not from fear but clarity. This wasn't just betrayal of the heart. It was betrayal of everything. She called her old friend Lisa, a paralegal she hadn't spoken to in years. "Hypothetically," Elena said softly, "if a husband was moving money out of a joint account without his wife's knowledge, what could she do?" Lisa paused. "Depends on how much proof she has." Elena smiled faintly. "Let's just say she's collecting." Over the next few weeks, Elena became someone else, quiet, methodical, precise. While he believed she was lost in grief, she was cataloging evidence, screenshots, receipts, emails. Every secret he thought buried was now neatly stored on that USB drive. And when he'd leave for business trips, she'd check his car's GPS history, trace his hotel bookings, and even his gift purchases. Each piece fit perfectly into the puzzle she was building. A picture of deceit, signed and sealed with his arrogance. But the most painful discovery came one night when she opened his office drawer and found a small velvet box. Inside was a ring. Not hers, the inscription read, "To new beginnings, M&D forever." Her hands trembled, not because she wanted to cry, but because she almost laughed. Forever, she thought. Let's see how long that lasts. By the time she closed the drawer, her decision was made. She wasn't going to explode. She wasn't going to confront him in rage. No, she was going to end him quietly. Because the sweetest revenge isn't shouting, "I told you so." It's watching them crumble under the weight of their own choices. While you stand tall, untouched, what do you think? Would you confront him now, or wait until every piece of truth was in your hands? Comment below. I want to know how many of you would play it calm. like Elena. By early spring, Elena had mastered the art of silence. To him, she was distant but docile, a wife accepting her fate. To everyone else, she was the picture of composure. But behind that calm exterior, every move she made was part of a larger design. He thought she was broken. She was calculating. The USB drive sat hidden inside a hollow book on the shelf. Evidence of every lie he'd ever told. Every stolen dollar, every message he thought would stay secret. One evening, he came home late again. The faint smell of perfume clung to his jacket, not hers. He mumbled excuses, kissed her on the cheek out of habit, and went upstairs. She followed a few minutes later, her face serene, her pulse steady. While he showered, she quietly unzipped his briefcase. Inside was an envelope, legal papers fresh and crisp, divorce papers. He was planning to serve her first, to take the house, the savings, even their daughter's college fund, all in the name of a mutual separation. Elena didn't cry. She smiled. The timing couldn't have been better. She photocopied every page, slipped them back perfectly, and returned to her room. Then she called her lawyer, the same one he'd fired years ago for being too cautious. "Thomas, it's Elena. I need your help, and your discretion." Over the next few weeks, her plan took shape. She began transferring small amounts from her personal account into a new one, quietly setting up her safety net. She met with her lawyer, updated her will, and even found a new apartment in her name, just in case things turned ugly. But her masterpiece, the thing that would end him completely, was still being crafted. It started with an email, a short, polite message to the woman named Mara. "You don't know me, but I think we both deserve the truth. If you want to see who he really is, meet me tomorrow at noon. Bring nothing. Tell no one." She didn't expect Mara to reply, but she did. "Where?" The next day, they met in a small cafe tucked behind the courthouse. Mara arrived first, young, nervous, clutching her phone like a lifeline. When Elena walked in, she didn't see an enemy. She saw a mirror of her younger self, the woman who once believed in promises. "You love him?" Elena asked quietly. Mara nodded. "He said you were cold." "Controlling," Elena almost laughed. "Of course he did." She slid a small envelope across the table, photos, messages, and bank transfers. The proof that he wasn't leaving for love. He was leaving to start over, with stolen money and false words. Mara's hands shook as she read. He tells everyone something," Elena interrupted softly. "That's what he does." By the time the meeting ended, Mara's world had cracked open. Elena didn't stay to watch. She walked out, her heels clicking against the pavement, every step echoing with quiet victory. That night, she placed a new envelope on the dining table, neatly sealed, addressed to him. Inside was everything: her lawyer's letter, her evidence, and one handwritten note. "You planned this for months. I planned it better. Goodbye." She knew he'd find it the next morning. She knew his shock would be priceless, because sometimes revenge doesn't come with screams or shattered plates. It comes with stillness, precision, and perfect timing. And when the moment arrived, Elena would be ready to watch his world fall apart, one lie at a time. Would you have warned the other woman like Elena did, or let her find out the hard way? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you'd do in her place. The next morning began like any other. Birds outside, sunlight spilling through the blinds, and the faint hum of the coffee maker. But something in the air felt different, heavy, charged. Elena sat at the table, calm as ever, stirring her tea slowly. Her movements were deliberate, measured, as if she were controlling every second of time itself. Upstairs, he was waking up late, groggy, unaware that the ground beneath his feet had already shifted. When he came down, his eyes landed on the envelope lying on the table, his name written in her graceful handwriting. He frowned, confused. "What's this?" She didn't look up. "You'll want to read it." He slid into the chair, opening the envelope with a smirk, expecting maybe an apology, a goodbye letter, something emotional and predictable. But as his eyes moved over the words, the smirk faded. His face drained of color. He flipped through the pages. Bank statements, screenshots, emails. Every secret he thought he'd buried was staring back at him, signed and time-stamped. Then he saw the note at the bottom, written in her familiar, neat handwriting. You built your freedom on my silence. You forgot. Silence is my sharpest weapon. His breathing quickened. You went through my things? She finally looked up, meeting his eyes. I went through my life and found what you were trying to steal. He slammed the papers down. You had no right, no right? She cut in, her voice calm but piercing. You humiliated me, lied to me. You were about to leave me with nothing. Don't talk to me about rights. For a moment, they stood in a silence so thick it hummed. Then he tried to switch tactics. Elena, this doesn't have to get ugly. We can fix this. I was confused. Stop, she said firmly. Don't insult me with half-truths. He stepped closer, desperate now. It was just a mistake, all right? I'll end it with her. Elena tilted her head slightly. You already did, he froze. What do you mean? She knows, Elena said quietly. About the money. About everything. His jaw dropped. You told her? I showed her. The silence after that was deafening. For the first time he looked small, like the walls around him were closing in. He tried to speak, but she continued, her tone cutting through the air like glass. You thought I'd fall apart. But I was watching, learning, and while you were planning your escape, I was preparing my freedom. He reached for the papers again, flipping through them in panic. You can't prove half of this. Oh, I already did, she replied. My lawyer has copies, and by now so does the court. He looked at her, eyes burning with fear and disbelief. You're destroying me. No, she said softly, her voice steady. You destroyed yourself. I'm just letting the truth breathe. The argument that followed wasn't loud, as it was cold, surgical. Every excuse he offered she dismantled with evidence. Every lie he reached for crumbled in his own hands. By the end, he stood in silence. Defeated, Elena gathered her things, her purse, her phone, her dignity, and turned to leave. He whispered, You'll regret this. She stopped at the door, looked back, and said the one line that would echo in his mind for years. The only thing I regret is giving you the power to hurt me. And then she walked out, no shouting, no tears, just silence, the kind that comes after justice finally speaks. If you were Elena, would you have walked away right there, or stayed to watch him break? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious which kind of strength you believe in. For weeks, Elena kept her distance, not out of hatred, but peace. The silence in her new apartment was strangely comforting. She slept lighter, breathed deeper, and for the first time in years, didn't wake up to someone else's shadow. But there was one thing she hadn't faced yet. Her daughter, Sophie. Sophie was 19, studying architecture, the perfect mix of her mother's calm and her father's confidence. She'd been away during the storm, college dorms, finals, a world far from the mess that had unraveled at home. Until one Sunday afternoon, when she showed up unannounced, Elena opened the door, surprised but smiling. Sophie? Her daughter's face was pale. Dad called me. Elena's smile faltered. And what did he say? That you left him, Sophie replied quietly. That you just gave up. For the first time in weeks, Elena felt her chest tighten. She motioned for Sophie to come in, poured her a glass of water, and sat across from her at the small dining table, the same kind of table they used to share family dinners around, back when love still lived there. Sophie, Elena began gently, there are things you don't know. Her daughter's eyes glistened. I just want to understand. He sounded so broken. I don't know who to believe anymore. Elena hesitated, not because she wanted to protect him, but because she wanted to protect her. But Sophie had grown up. She wasn't a child anymore. She deserved the truth. Elena reached into a drawer and took out a small folder. Not the full evidence, just enough to show her daughter the man behind the mask. Photos, bank records, copies of messages. Nothing cruel, just truth. Sophie looked through them silently. Her breathing hitched. He cheated? She whispered. Yes, and he tried to. Take everything? Elena nodded. Even you, if it made his story cleaner. For a long moment, Sophie said nothing. Then tears filled her eyes. Not just for her mother, but for the version of her father she'd just lost. Elena reached across the table, placing a hand on hers. I didn't want you to hate him. I just needed you to see clearly. Sophie wiped her tears, her voice trembling but fierce. He told me you were cold. But now I see. You were just tired of being hurt. Elena's throat tightened. Her daughter stood up, her eyes sharper now. He asked me to come live with him. but I'm not going anywhere near that house. Not until he learns what love actually means. In that moment, Elena saw herself in Sophie. The same fire, the same quiet strength. But there was something more in her daughter's gaze. Rage wrapped in clarity. Sophie hugged her mother tight. "You didn't lose everything, Mom. You just made room for better." Elena held her, tears finally spilling. Not of pain, but of relief. Because sometimes the real victory isn't destroying what hurt you. It's watching the next generation see the truth and choose not to repeat it. Later that night, Sophie posted a simple quote on her story. "Strong women don't seek revenge. They rebuild, stronger, wiser, unshakable." And for the first time since that awful night at the restaurant, Elena smiled. Really smiled, because she hadn't just survived. She'd raised a woman who never had to learn survival the hard way. Do you think children should always know the full truth about their parents' mistakes? Or is silence a kind of protection? Tell me what you think in the comments. This part always divides people. He had always believed control was power. The right words, the right lies, the perfect image. For years it worked. People admired him, envied him even. But after Elena left, the world began to shift. Slowly, quietly, and then all at once. It started at his office. Whispers spread before he even walked in that Monday morning. A client had backed out citing ethical concerns. Another partner avoided eye contact in the hallway. His assistant, who once greeted him with forced smiles, handed him a stack of letters without a word. Inside them, cancellations. Accounts frozen, his name attached to pending investigations. He laughed it off at first, told himself it was temporary, that his reputation could survive anything. But reputations like glass don't crack quietly, they shatter. By the end of the week, his boss called him in. "We can't keep you here, Daniel. Too much attention, too much risk." And just like that, 20 years of climbing vanished in a 10-minute conversation. When he got home, the silence of the house pressed down on him. No laughter, no smell of coffee, just emptiness and the echo of choices he couldn't undo. He poured himself a drink, trying to drown the noise in his head. That's when his phone buzzed. A message from Mara. "I saw the papers. You said she was crazy. You said she had nothing. You lied." He typed back quickly. "Mara, please, it's not what you think." The 3 dots blinked for a moment. Then her reply came. "I think I finally see who you are." And just like that, she was gone too. Blocked, deleted, disappeared. For the first time in years, Daniel sat in silence without anyone to lie to. He glanced around the house. The perfect furniture, the perfect life. Everything felt wrong now, like an empty set after the actors have left. He poured another drink, then another. But even the burn couldn't wash away the bitterness of his own reflection, staring back from the glass. The following weeks blurred together. Job interviews, rejection letters, polite emails that all said the same thing. "We appreciate your experience, but..." No one wanted his name attached to theirs. He tried calling Elena once, just once. The line rang and rang, then went to voicemail. He didn't speak. He couldn't. He just listened to her recorded voice, calm, distant, free. Then he hung up. That night, he opened the same box that once held Mara's ring, empty now. Just the engraving left to remind him of promises that never meant anything. To new beginnings, M&D forever. He laughed bitterly. Forever had lasted 6 weeks. The man who had spent his life crafting illusions was finally forced to live in the truth. Meanwhile, Elena's name began to rise, her design business growing, her story quietly inspiring others. People admired her grace, her composure. They called her the woman who rebuilt herself from ashes. And every time Daniel saw her name mentioned online, it hit him like a punch to the chest. She had become everything he tried to take from her. Respected, admired, unshakable. Sometimes karma doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers, softly, perfectly timed, and impossible to ignore. He had destroyed his marriage, his career, his reputation, all for a fantasy that didn't even last long enough to make him happy. And the cruelest part, the world didn't hate him. The world simply forgot him, because that's the worst kind of punishment. To be erased from the story you thought you controlled. Do you believe in karma? Or do you think people only fall when others help them fall? Tell me your take in the comments, and this part always sparks a debate. Elena didn't rebuild overnight. Healing isn't cinematic, it's messy, quiet, and painfully slow. There were days she couldn't get out of bed, when memories hit like waves, her hands trembling as she reached for the phone she promised herself not to touch again. But then, she'd remember that one night when she stood outside her own house and watched him laugh with another woman. That memory, that burn, became her strength. She got up, every single day. Her first steps were small, clearing out the house of everything that didn't belong anymore. The expensive watch he'd gifted her on their anniversary? Gone. The photos framed to look perfect? Burned. The wedding ring? She placed it in a drawer, not as a memory, but as proof of what she survived. Elena started working from her tiny home office, taking small freelance projects. Late nights turned into early mornings, coffee into motivation, and failures into lessons. The business that once scared her, that he said she couldn't handle, slowly started to take shape. One client turned into 3. 3 turned into 10. And soon, her small brand, Eleonora Designs, began to spread across social media. But it wasn't just the designs people fell in love with. It was her story. She never talked about revenge, never named names. She talked about resilience, about starting again when you have nothing left. And that honesty connected with thousands. One evening, she sat at her desk surrounded by sketches and glowing messages from women, thanking her for inspiring them. A tear rolled down her cheek, not of sadness but of relief. She had finally found herself again. A few months later, she was invited to speak at a women's entrepreneurship event. Standing backstage, her heart pounded. The same woman who once doubted every step now had a room full of strangers waiting to hear her story. When her name was announced, she walked out, calm, radiant, powerful. She looked at the audience and said softly, "I used to think strength meant holding everything together, but real strength is knowing when to let go." The room fell silent. She spoke about betrayal, heartbreak, and how rebuilding isn't about becoming the same person. It's about creating someone new, someone stronger. When she finished, the audience rose to their feet. Applause thundered through the hall. And in that moment, Elena realized she didn't just survive her story. She rewrote it. After the event, she stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights shimmered, and for the first time in years, she smiled. Not the forced kind she wore during the pain, but the one that came from peace. The past didn't define her anymore. It shaped her, yes, but it no longer owned her. Sometimes, it takes losing everything to understand your true worth. Sometimes, the fall isn't the end, it's the beginning of flight. And if you're listening to this right now, maybe that's your sign too. Because your story isn't over. It's just about to begin. If this part touched you, drop a in the comments and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. You never know who might find strength in your story.